I wasn't even supposed to be on that road. If my boss hadn't kept me 45 minutes late, I would have already been home on my couch, eating leftover pizza and watching some terrible reality show. Instead, I found myself driving through the worst thunderstorm I'd seen all year, gripping the steering wheel while my windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the sheets of rain. Visibility was awful. Every few seconds, lightning lit up the highway just enough for me to see the road before everything disappeared behind another curtain of rain. I kept telling myself I should have taken the interstate, but the GPS insisted this back road would save 15 minutes. Some shortcut. The radio suddenly filled with static before cutting out completely. Perfect, I muttered. Then I saw hazard lights blinking ahead. At first, I thought it was a police car, but as I got closer, I realized it was an old dark blue pickup pulled onto the shoulder. Someone was standing beside it. The guy was soaked. His hoodie clung to him from the rain while he leaned against the truck, looking down at what was obviously a completely flat tire. Most cars drove right past him. Honestly, I almost did too. It was nearly 10 at night. The storm was getting worse. Stopping for a stranger on an empty road wasn't exactly the smartest idea. I drove another 50 yards before guilt hit me. Damn it. I sighed, checked my mirrors, and pulled onto the shoulder behind the pickup. The stranger looked up immediately. Even through the rain, I could tell he hadn't expected anyone to stop. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment, pulled my hood over my head, and stepped into ankle-deep water. Within seconds, I was drenched. "You okay?" I shouted over the rain. He laughed once. "I've definitely had better evenings." His voice was calm, not panicked, just tired. As I got closer, I finally got a good look at him. He looked around my age, maybe 27 or 28. Tall, broad shoulders, dark brown hair plastered to his forehead from the rain, a short beard that somehow still looked neat despite the weather. His blue eyes met mine for a second before he smiled apologetically. "I'm Harvey." "Mitchell." We shook hands instinctively before both laughing. "Well, that was pointless," he said, looking at our dripping hands. "They can't get any wetter." He chuckled. It was surprisingly contagious. "So?" I looked toward the tire. "Spare?" "Yeah." He pointed into the truck bed. "I've got everything." I knelt beside the wheel. "Looks like you hit something." "I never even saw it." Lightning flashed overhead. The tire had a nasty tear in the sidewall. "No fixing that tonight." Harvey rubbed the back of his neck. "I was supposed to make it to my sister's place an hour ago." "You got a jack?" He opened the toolbox. "I've got one. Just, I haven't actually changed a tire before." I looked up. "Seriously?" He gave an embarrassed grin. "My dad always did it." "I guess tonight's your first lesson." He smiled again. "I appreciate this." Together, we unloaded the spare. The rain made everything twice as difficult. The lug nuts refused to move. The jack kept sinking into the muddy shoulder. At one point, we both slipped trying to lift the tire. I caught myself against the truck. Harvey wasn't as lucky. He landed squarely in the mud with an exhausted groan. For about 2 seconds, we just stared at each other. Then I burst out laughing. "I'm sorry." "No, you're not." "I'm really trying to be." He looked down at his muddy jeans. "I look ridiculous." "You kind of do." He started laughing too. The tension disappeared instantly. It was strange. 10 minutes earlier, we'd been complete strangers. Now we were standing in a thunderstorm, laughing over a flat tire like we'd known each other for years. "You know," Harvey said while wiping mud off his hands, "most people would have just kept driving." "I almost did." His eyebrows lifted. "Really?" "Yeah." "I appreciate the honesty. I figured if someone left me stranded out here, I'd hope another idiot would stop." So you're calling yourself an idiot? I stopped in a thunderstorm. Fair point. Another crack of thunder echoed overhead. The rain somehow became even heavier. Within minutes, we'd finally loosened the last lug nut. Ready? Harvey nodded. Together, we pulled the damaged tire free. It was heavier than either of us expected. Easy, I said. I've got it. You sure? I think so. The tire slipped. Instinctively, Harvey grabbed it. At the same time, I reached for it. Instead of catching the tire, I grabbed his wrist. He looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us moved for a second. The rain seemed impossibly loud around us. Then he smiled. You've got good timing. I let go immediately. Sorry. No worries. He lifted the spare into place. Between the two of us, we finally secured it. When the truck settled back onto the ground, Harvey stepped back and let out a long breath. I honestly didn't think I'd be driving anywhere tonight. You should still get that replaced tomorrow. Oh, absolutely. He closed the toolbox and leaned against the truck. You hungry? The question caught me completely off guard. What? My sister lives another 20 minutes away. He glanced toward the road. But there's a diner about 5 miles back. I laughed. You're asking the random guy who stopped to help you change a tire to get dinner? He shrugged. Seems less weird than pretending we didn't spend the last 40 minutes getting soaked together. I couldn't help smiling. When you put it like that, Harvey scratched the back of his neck. If you've got somewhere to be, I get it. I looked at the rain, then back at him. Truthfully, I didn't have anywhere important to be. All right, I said, but you're buying the coffee. His grin widened immediately. Deal. As we climbed into our separate vehicles, I had absolutely no idea that stopping to help a stranger with a flat tire would end up changing my life in ways I never could have imagined. The rain hadn't let up by the time we reached the diner. It was one of those old roadside places with a flickering open sign, fogged up windows, and a parking lot that looked more like a lake. Harvey parked beside my car and we jogged to the entrance, both laughing as another gust of wind soaked us all over again. The warmth inside hit us immediately. Coffee, fresh fries, bacon. It smelled like every late-night diner I'd ever stopped at on road trips. A waitress looked us over and smiled. You boys look like you lost a fight with Mother Nature. Harvey glanced at me. I think it was a draw. She laughed and led us to a booth near the window. Only after sitting down did I realize how ridiculous we looked. My hoodie was dripping onto the floor, and Harvey still had streaks of mud across one leg. You know, I said, people are definitely assuming we got stranded together. We kinda did. Fair enough. He smiled as he wrapped both hands around the coffee mug the waitress had just set down. I seriously can't thank you enough. You already did. No. He shook his head. I mean it. There was something sincere about the way he said it. Not overly dramatic, just honest. I've had one of those weeks, he admitted. Flat tire was just the icing on the cake. What happened? He let out a quiet laugh. My company downsized. Oh. I wasn't laid off. But half my department was. I nodded. I've been covering everyone else's work ever since. What do you do? Commercial construction. He took a sip of coffee. Project manager. I mostly spend my days putting out fires. Literal ones? I hope not. That earned another laugh. What about you? I'm a physical therapist. His eyebrows lifted. Really? Small clinic? I spend my days convincing stubborn people that stretching isn't a government conspiracy. He laughed loud enough that a couple at the next table glanced over. Okay, that's probably true. You'd be surprised. I already believe you. The conversation became surprisingly easy after that. We talked about terrible bosses, favorite movies, the worst jobs we'd ever had. At one point, Harvey admitted he'd once spent an entire summer dressed as a pirate at a tourist attraction. I nearly choked on my fries. You're kidding. I wish. There are pictures? Oh, absolutely not. There are. I'm never showing you. You just guaranteed that someday you will. He groaned dramatically. That was a mistake. The waitress brought our burgers, and for a while we simply ate. Comfortable silence. It was strange. Usually meeting someone new felt like work. Questions, awkward pauses, trying to think of the next thing to say. With Harvey, conversation just happened? So, I finally asked, what were you doing on that road anyway? My sister. He smiled. She's expecting her first baby. Congratulations. Thanks. I promised I'd help paint the nursery this weekend. First uncle. Yep. He looked almost excited saying it. I've already been informed that I'm required to spoil the kid. You don't seem upset about that. I'm absolutely not. What about you? He looked at me. Family close? My parents live about an hour away. My younger sister just got married. So you're the fun uncle too? I laughed. Hopefully someday. He nodded thoughtfully. You'd probably be good at it. I wasn't sure why that compliment stuck with me. Maybe because it didn't feel forced. It just felt genuine. About an hour later, the storm finally started calming down. The pounding rain softened into a steady drizzle. The diner had emptied until only a handful of people remained. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. Harvey glanced out the window. I should probably get going. Your sister's probably worried. She's called 4 times. I laughed. You should answer eventually. Probably. He reached into his pocket and hesitated. This is going to sound weird. Oh? I know we literally met because my tire exploded. I smiled. But? He scratched the back of his neck. I'd kind of like to see you again. For a split second, my brain completely stopped working. Was he? No, don't assume. Maybe he just wanted to thank me properly. Maybe he was just making a friend. Still, I couldn't deny the little rush of excitement I felt. I'd like that too. His shoulders visibly relaxed. Good. He slid his phone across the table. Number? I typed mine in before I could overthink it, then handed him my phone. He entered his contact. Harvey. Simple. A second later, both of our phones buzzed. There, he said. So now you know I'm not giving you a fake number. I appreciate the honesty. He stood, pulling his jacket back on. I owe you dinner next time. You already bought dinner? I owe you one where neither of us looks like drowned raccoons. I laughed. That's fair. We walked outside together. The air smelled fresh after the storm. Clouds were beginning to break apart, revealing a few scattered stars. Harvey stopped beside his truck. I really am glad you stopped. I'm glad you had a spare tire. He grinned. I'll text you? I'll hold you to it. For just a second, it felt like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he simply smiled. Drive safe, Mitchell. You too, Harvey. I watched his pickup disappear down the highway before climbing into my own car. The drive home felt strangely lighter. I kept replaying the evening in my head. The rain, the laughter, the easy conversation. It was ridiculous. I'd known the guy for less than 3 hours. Yet, when my phone buzzed before I even reached home, I smiled before I looked at the screen. Harvey. Made it halfway without another flat tire. I'd call that progress. I laughed to myself before replying. Me. Don't celebrate until you reach your sister's driveway? 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Harvey. Fair point. Also, thanks again, Mitchell. Tonight could have been a disaster. Instead, it turned into one of the best nights I've had in a long time. I stared at the message for a moment. Without realizing it, I felt exactly the same. Over the next week, Harvey and I texted almost every day. It started with little things. A picture of the sunrise from the construction site he was managing. A complaint about my first patient canceling 5 minutes before their appointment. Memes, bad jokes, photos of the world's ugliest vending machine sandwiches. Nothing serious. But somehow, I found myself checking my phone more often than usual. One Thursday afternoon, my screen lit up while I was finishing paperwork. Harvey. Coffee Saturday? I smiled before I even realized it. Me. As long as there isn't another thunderstorm. His reply came almost instantly. I'll inspect all 4 tires beforehand. Saturday morning arrived warm and sunny. Almost impossible to believe it had stormed so badly just days earlier. We met at a small cafe downtown. This time, Harvey wasn't soaked in rain or covered in mud. He was wearing dark jeans, a navy button-up with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, and clean white sneakers. He looked good. Really good. He spotted me before I reached the entrance and waved. There he is. The tire expert. I've already told 3 people I changed it myself? I laughed. Liar. I supervised. From the mud. Exactly. Inside, we ordered coffee and found a table outside beneath a large umbrella. It felt different seeing him in daylight. Less like a stranger. More like someone I'd known for months. So, I asked, did the nursery get painted? He groaned. My sister changed her mind halfway through. Oh no. We painted 1 wall. Then she decided she hated the color. I laughed. Seriously? We started over. You've earned sympathy. I've earned hazard pay. He shook his head dramatically. I've never cared so much about shades of green. I didn't even know there were that many. There aren't. They're all just green. He looked horrified. If my sister heard you say that, she'd ban you from the baby shower. The hours disappeared. We wandered through a weekend farmer's market after finishing our coffee. Harvey insisted I try homemade peach jam. I convinced him to sample spicy cheese he'd been avoiding. He immediately regretted it. My mouth is on fire. You'll survive. You don't know that. He bought 2 bottles of water while glaring at me. I trusted you. I never said it wasn't spicy. You conveniently left that part out. Around lunchtime, we found ourselves sitting on a bench overlooking the river. People walked dogs along the path. Families pushed strollers. A street musician played acoustic guitar nearby. For the first time since we'd met, the conversation slowed naturally. Not awkwardly. Comfortably. Harvey broke the silence first. Can I ask you something? Sure. Were you always out? The question caught me off guard. I looked at him carefully. Since college. My parents needed a little time, but they're great now. He nodded thoughtfully. That's good. What about you? He watched the water for several seconds before answering. My family doesn't know. Something in his voice made me sit a little straighter. They don't? He shook his head. No. I've known for years. He let out a quiet breath. Never found the right time. I didn't interrupt. I kept thinking there'd be some perfect moment. There never was. I got busy. Work. Life. Eventually, it became harder because I'd waited so long. He laughed softly, but there wasn't much humor in it. Now I'm almost 30. I still haven't told them. You don't have to rush. I know. They're good people. I don't think they'd hate me. I'm just scared everything changes. I understood that feeling, even after all these years. I can't promise it'll be easy, I said quietly. But hiding who you are gets exhausting. He looked at me. It does. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The breeze carried the smell of the river and fresh cut grass. I'm glad I told you. I'm glad you trusted me. He smiled. So am I. As the afternoon stretched on, we walked back toward the parking lot. Neither of us seemed eager to end the day. You hungry? Harvey asked. We've been eating all day. So, yes? I laughed. You're impossible. I've been told that. We ended up sharing pizza at a little place nearby. By the time the sun started setting, we'd spent almost 9 hours together. 9 hours. It hadn't felt that long. Standing beside our cars, Harvey shoved his hands into his pockets. I had fun today. I did too. We should do this again. I was hoping you'd say that. He smiled. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he reached over and brushed something off my shoulder. A tiny leaf. His fingers barely touched me. It lasted maybe a second. Still. Neither of us moved afterward. Our eyes met. There was something different there. Not just friendliness anymore. Something quieter. Warmer. Then a car pulled past us, snapping the moment. Harvey stepped back. Guess I should let you get home. Probably. You working Monday? Yeah. You? Unfortunately. He smiled. I'll text you. You'd better. He laughed before climbing into his truck. As I drove home, I caught myself smiling at every red light. I tried to convince myself I was reading too much into things. Maybe Harvey was simply kind. Maybe he treated everyone this way. But one thought kept returning no matter how hard I pushed it away. If this was just friendship, why did it already feel like the beginning of something much bigger? By the time 2 weeks had passed, seeing Harvey had quietly become part of my routine. We still texted every day. Sometimes it was just a quick, hope work isn't killing you. Other times, we'd spend an hour sending voice messages back and forth because one of us was too busy to type. Somehow, it never felt forced. It just fit. One Friday evening, my phone buzzed while I was locking up the clinic. Harvey. Random question. Me. Those usually end badly. A few seconds later, another message appeared. My sister finally had the baby. I smiled. Everything okay? Everyone's healthy. Mom and baby are doing great. Then another message. Family's having a barbecue Sunday afternoon. Would you want to come? I stopped walking, read it again. Then a third message arrived. As my friend. No pressure. I stared at the screen longer than I probably should have. Meeting someone's family wasn't exactly a casual step, even if it was just as friends. Still, something about the invitation made me smile. I'd like that. Sunday afternoon couldn't have been more different from the night we'd met. Blue skies, warm sunshine, children running around a backyard, someone grilling burgers while country music played softly from a speaker on the porch. Harvey was already waiting in the driveway when I pulled up. He was wearing a faded gray t-shirt and jeans, sunglasses pushed up on his head. He walked over with the same easy smile I'd started looking forward to. You came. You invited me? I know. He laughed. I was just making sure this wasn't a hallucination. I handed him the small gift bag I'd brought. For your sister. Inside were a baby blanket and a stuffed elephant. His expression softened. Mitchell, you didn't have to do this. I wanted to. He looked at the bag for another second before meeting my eyes. She's going to love it. The afternoon was surprisingly relaxed. Harvey introduced me to everyone. This is Mitchell, the guy who rescued me during the storm. Every single person laughed. Apparently, the flat tire story had already become family legend. His sister, Emma, immediately hugged me. "So, you're the reason my brother actually made it here. I've been wanting to thank you. It wasn't a big deal. It was to us." She smiled before introducing me to her newborn son. Holding a baby that tiny always felt terrifying. Harvey laughed the entire time I looked completely terrified. "You're holding him like he's made of glass." "He practically is." "He's 7 pounds?" "Exactly." Harvey gently adjusted the baby's blanket. "There. See? You're doing fine." His hand brushed mine for just a moment while fixing the blanket. Neither of us reacted, at least not outwardly. Later that afternoon, Harvey and I escaped the noise for a few minutes. His parents' property backed onto a small lake, and there was an old wooden dock stretching out over the water. We sat side by side with our shoes off, our feet dangling above the lake. "I needed 5 minutes," Harvey admitted. "Big family?" "The biggest." I noticed. "They're wonderful." "They're also loud." I laughed. My family isn't exactly quiet either. A comfortable silence settled between us. Somewhere across the lake, someone was fishing. The water barely rippled. "You fit in pretty well back there," Harvey said. I was nervous. "Really?" I didn't want anyone wondering why I was there. They assumed exactly what I told them. "That you saved me." I looked over at him. "And that's enough?" He hesitated. "For now." His answer lingered between us. "For now. Not forever. Just for now." As the sun began to dip lower, we wandered down a trail that circled part of the lake. The sounds of the barbecue faded behind us. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Harvey admitted. "About?" "Telling my parents." I looked at him. "You don't have to decide today." "I know. But meeting you." He smiled faintly. "It made me realize how tired I am of pretending." I didn't know what to say, so I simply listened. I hate introducing people as friends when they could be more. My heart skipped. Could be more. He hadn't looked at me when he said it. He was staring at the path ahead. "I don't even know if that's what this is." He laughed quietly. "We've only known each other a few weeks." I smiled. "I've been wondering the same thing." He finally looked over. "You have?" "I wouldn't have spent every weekend with you otherwise." He laughed. "Good." That would have been embarrassing. For both of us. We kept walking. Slowly. Neither of us seemed eager to break the moment. Eventually, Harvey stopped near a large oak tree overlooking the water. "I should probably admit something." "Go ahead." "The day I asked you to dinner." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I almost talked myself out of it." "Why?" "I figured you'd think I was crazy." "I kind of did." He laughed. "Fair. But I also didn't want the night to end." That confession sat quietly between us. "I didn't want it to end either," I admitted. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. The breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Harvey took one small step closer. Close enough that I could see the nervousness in his eyes. Close enough that I wondered if he was thinking exactly what I was. Then voices echoed from the house. "Harvey!" His mother's voice carried across the yard. "We're cutting the cake." We both looked back toward the house. Harvey let out an amused sigh. "Perfect timing." I laughed. "Your family has incredible timing." "They always do." As we walked back together, our shoulders brushed once. Neither of us moved away. Neither of us mentioned it. But for the rest of the afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about how close we'd come to crossing a line that neither of us seemed afraid of anymore. After the barbecue, something shifted between us. Not dramatically. Neither of us suddenly confessed our feelings or started acting like we were dating. If anything, we became a little more careful, maybe because we both knew there was something there now, something neither of us wanted to ruin. The following Wednesday, Harvey called me instead of texting. I answered with a smile. Hey. Hey. There was a pause. You busy? I just got home. Good. Another pause. I think I'm stalling. I leaned against my kitchen counter. About what? He let out a slow breath. I told my parents I wanted to come by tonight. My heart skipped. You mean? I'm going to tell them. I stayed quiet, not because I didn't know what to say, because I wanted him to have the space. I'm terrified. I know. I've rehearsed this conversation 100 times, and now I can't remember any of it. I smiled softly. You don't need a speech. I know. His voice dropped. I don't want to lose them. You probably won't. But if tonight doesn't go the way you hope. I paused. You won't go through it alone? The line stayed silent for a moment. Then Harvey spoke quietly. Thank you. That evening felt strangely long. I couldn't focus on the movie I'd put on. I checked my phone more times than I wanted to admit. 9 o'clock came, then 10. Still nothing. Finally, just after 10:30, my phone rang. It was Harvey. I answered immediately. Hey. He didn't speak for several seconds. I could hear him breathing. Then, they hugged me. I closed my eyes. They hugged me, Mitchell. Relief flooded through me. My mom cried. My dad didn't say anything for about a minute. I thought... His voice cracked slightly. I thought everything was over. But then he walked over and hugged me. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. I'm really happy for you. They asked why I waited so long. What did you tell them? The truth. I was scared. Were they upset? A little. He laughed quietly. Mostly that I thought they'd stop loving me. I leaned back against the couch. Parents have a way of surprising us. They do. Another small silence. Mitchell? Yeah? I told them about you. I blinked. You did? I said. He laughed nervously. I met someone? Someone, not just a friend. Someone. What did they say? My mom asked when she'd get to meet you properly. I laughed. And your dad? He asked if you were the guy who fixed the tire. I couldn't help laughing harder. So I'm still tire guy. You'll probably always be tire guy. 2 nights later, Harvey invited me over for dinner. This isn't fancy, he warned. I'm making pasta. I like pasta. Good. Because it's about the only thing I'm confident cooking. When I arrived, he was already standing outside his apartment building waiting. You didn't have to come down. I know. I wanted to. His apartment suited him. Simple, neat, a few framed landscape photographs on the walls, shelves filled with books and travel guides, a guitar resting in one corner. You play? He looked toward it. A little. You? I tried. How'd that go? My neighbors appreciated it when I stopped. He laughed. Dinner's almost ready. The evening felt comfortable. We cooked together. Well, mostly Harvey cooked while I chopped vegetables under close supervision. You're judging my knife skills. They're concerning. They're efficient. They're dangerous. I still have all my fingers. Barely. After dinner, we moved onto the small balcony overlooking the city. The sky was clear, the air warm. Somewhere below, traffic hummed softly through the streets. Harvey rested his elbows on the railing. I've been thinking. That's usually dangerous. It probably is. He smiled. I don't want to keep pretending this is just friendship. I looked at him. Neither of us smiled now. I don't either. He nodded slowly. I wasn't sure. I was. I just didn't know if you felt the same. I do. The words came out quietly, but once they were spoken, they felt impossible to take back. Harvey stepped a little closer. So, he smiled nervously. I haven't done this in a long time. You don't have to rush. I'm not rushing. I'm asking. He searched my face. Can I kiss you? Instead of answering immediately, I smiled. I was wondering when you'd ask. He laughed softly. Then, slowly enough that either of us could have changed our minds, he closed the small distance between us. The kiss was gentle, brief, careful, more about confirmation than passion. When we pulled apart, neither of us moved very far. Harvey let out a quiet breath. I've wanted to do that since the diner. I laughed. I was hoping you would. So, he smiled. Does this mean I can officially stop introducing you as the guy who changed my tire? I grinned. You'd better think of something better. He reached for my hand. This time, neither of us hesitated. We stood there together, overlooking the city lights, both smiling for reasons that had nothing to do with the view. For the first time since that stormy night, it felt like we'd finally admitted what had been growing between us all along. After that first kiss, nothing suddenly became perfect. If anything, it became more real. We weren't just two guys texting every day anymore. We were figuring out what it actually meant to build something together. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Harvey. Harvey, just making sure I didn't imagine last night. I laughed before replying. Me, you definitely didn't. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Good, because I haven't stopped smiling. I caught myself doing exactly the same thing. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. If I finished work early, I'd meet Harvey for dinner. If he had to stay late at a construction site, I'd bring coffee on my way home. Sometimes we'd spend an evening walking through the park. Other nights we'd stay in, cook together, and argue over what movie to watch. You've never seen The Shawshank Redemption? He stared at me in disbelief. I know. You've had 30 years. I've been busy. Doing what? Avoiding judgment from people like you. He laughed and tossed me the remote. Tonight's educational. One Saturday morning, Harvey showed up outside my apartment carrying 2 paper bags. You ordered breakfast? No. I did. He held up the bags proudly. And before you ask, yes, I remembered your favorite pastries. I shook my head. You're setting unrealistic expectations. I know. I'm trying to impress you. You already have. His smile softened. Good. Later that afternoon, we decided to drive out to a state park about an hour away. The weather couldn't have been more different from the night we'd met. Bright blue sky, warm sunshine. The trails were lined with tall pines, and the smell of damp earth lingered after the previous week's rain. Harvey walked beside me with a backpack slung over one shoulder. You know, he said, this is much nicer than changing tires. I was thinking the same thing. No mud, no lightning, no near-death experiences. Hopefully. We laughed. The trail eventually opened onto a rocky overlook above a lake. We sat together, sharing sandwiches while watching kayaks drift across the water. It's peaceful here, Harvey said. I come here sometimes when work gets overwhelming. I can see why. He leaned back on his hands. I've been thinking about something. What's that? The storm. I smiled. The famous storm? The one that started all this. He looked over at me. If you'd kept driving, I finished the thought for him. We never would have met. He nodded. It's strange how one small decision changes everything. It really is. On the hike back, Harvey reached for my hand. Not because anyone was watching, not because he wanted to make a statement, simply because he wanted to. Our fingers intertwined naturally. Neither of us said anything. It felt easy. A few days later, Harvey invited me to dinner at his parents' house. Are you sure? My mom asked when I was bringing you. And apparently I've delayed long enough. I laughed. No pressure. None at all. His parents welcomed me with the same warmth I'd felt at the barbecue. Only this time, everything was out in the open. His mother hugged both of us. His father shook my hand before smiling at Harvey. So this is Mitchell, the tire guy? Harvey sighed dramatically. I told you. I'll never escape it. His dad chuckled. Probably not. Dinner was relaxed. We talked about work, travel, and Harvey's new nephew. Watching Harvey laugh with his family, after everything he'd been afraid of losing, made something settle inside me. He looked lighter, like he wasn't carrying the same weight anymore. That evening, after we left his parents' house, we stopped beside the same lake where we'd sat during the barbecue weeks earlier. The dock was empty. The water reflected the stars overhead. Harvey leaned against the railing. I owe you something. You don't owe me anything. I do? He looked at me. If you hadn't stopped that night, I probably would have figured my life out eventually. But I don't think I'd be this happy. I stepped beside him. You figured it out. You did the hard part. He smiled. Maybe. But you made it easier. He reached into his jacket pocket. I actually have something. You bought me a gift? It's small. He handed me a tiny keychain. Attached to it was a miniature silver tire. I stared at it before laughing. You've got to be kidding me. I found it online. It was too perfect. I laughed so hard I had to lean against him. This is ridiculous. I know. I'm keeping mine too. He held up an identical keychain hanging from his own keys. So, now we're both stuck remembering that night forever. I looked down at the tiny tire, then back at Harvey. I don't think I would have forgotten anyway. His smile faded into something softer. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The breeze rippled across the lake. Finally, Harvey slipped his arm around my shoulders. I leaned into him without thinking. Standing there beneath a sky full of stars, it struck me just how unlikely all of this had been. One storm, one flat tire, one decision to stop. Sometimes that was all it took for two completely different lives to find the same road. Autumn arrived faster than either of us expected. The trees around the city turned shades of orange and gold. Mornings became cooler. And somehow Harvey and I had been together for almost 6 months. It still felt strange saying the word boyfriend. Not because it felt wrong, because it felt surprisingly right. One Friday evening, Harvey picked me up after work. Where are we going? You'll see. I don't like mysterious answers. I know. That's why I gave you one. I laughed as I climbed into his truck. You've become very confident. I've had a good influence. I think that's backwards. About 30 minutes later, I realized exactly where we were. This road? Harvey smiled without looking at me. Recognize it? You brought me back here. The same quiet highway stretched ahead. The same rolling hills. The same long shoulder where months earlier, I'd noticed a pickup with flashing hazard lights during a storm. Only now the sky was clear. The sunset painted everything gold. Harvey pulled onto the shoulder and shut off the engine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. You know, he said quietly, I drive this road a lot for work. I never told you that. You didn't? I've passed this spot dozens of times. Every single time. He smiled to himself. I think about you. I looked out the windshield. It doesn't even feel like the same place. I know. He opened his door. Come on. We walked a short distance along the shoulder until Harvey stopped. I think it was right here. The tire? He nodded. Right about here. I laughed. You looked completely hopeless. I was. You admitted you'd never changed one. I still haven't. You changed exactly one. And had professional supervision. I charged reasonable rates. You accepted coffee. Very expensive coffee. Harvey laughed. You know what my dad told me after everything? What? He said he was glad I never learned how to change a tire. I looked at him, confused. Why? He said, Harvey smiled warmly. If I had changed it myself that night, I would have driven away before you ever stopped. For a second, neither of us spoke. The breeze moved through the tall grass beside the road. I've thought about that too, I admitted. I almost kept driving. I know. You told me. I'm really glad guilt won. He chuckled. So am I. We climbed over the guardrail and walked toward a small hill overlooking the valley. Harvey spread out a blanket he'd somehow managed to hide in the truck. You planned this? Maybe. There's even food. I definitely planned this. Inside the basket were sandwiches, fruit, cookies, and a thermos of hot chocolate. You've become impressive. I've been practicing. We sat together watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon. Everything felt quiet, peaceful, the kind of silence that only exists when you're completely comfortable with someone. After a while, Harvey reached into his jacket pocket. I've got something else. I raised an eyebrow. Another tire keychain? He laughed. No. This one's slightly more meaningful. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph. I immediately recognized it. It was from his sister's barbecue. Someone had captured a completely candid moment. Harvey and I were standing beside the baby stroller, laughing about something neither of us could remember. We weren't looking at the camera. We were looking at each other. The smiles were effortless, natural, real. I asked Emma for a copy, Harvey said quietly. She said this was her favorite picture from that day. I couldn't stop looking at it. I didn't even know anyone took this. I didn't either. He smiled. But I like it. So do I. The last of the sunlight disappeared. The first stars began appearing overhead. Harvey shifted closer until our shoulders touched. You know, he looked up at the sky. I spent years worrying about how my life would change if I stopped hiding. And it changed. He turned toward me. For the better. I reached for his hand. I think mine did too. He squeezed my fingers gently. Best flat tire I've ever had. I laughed. I can't believe you're actually grateful for a blown tire. I'm grateful for what happened because of it. He leaned over and kissed my forehead. It was such a small gesture. Simple, affectionate, yet somehow it meant as much as our first kiss had months earlier. We stayed there until the air became cold enough to send us back toward the truck. As we drove home, I looked out at the now dark road. Funny how a place that had once represented inconvenience, rain, and uncertainty had become one of my favorite memories. Sometimes the places where life seems to fall apart are the same places where something wonderful quietly begins. Exactly 1 year after the storm, Harvey texted me one sentence. Don't make plans tonight. That was all. No explanation, no hints. Just that. I spent the entire day wondering what he was planning. By the time I got home from work, he was already waiting outside my apartment in the same pickup truck I'd first seen with a flat tire. He smiled as I walked over. Happy anniversary. I laughed. Anniversary of what? He looked at me like I should have known. The worst tire I've ever owned. I shook my head. Of course. I've committed to the bit. I can tell. Instead of driving toward downtown, Harvey headed out of the city. I recognized the route almost immediately. We're going back. He nodded. One last time. The highway looked completely different from the night we'd met. The shoulder where he'd been stranded was dry. Wildflowers had grown along the edge of the road. The storm felt like a lifetime ago. Harvey parked in the same spot and turned off the engine. Neither of us rushed to get out. It's funny, I said. I used to hate driving in bad weather. And now? Now, every time it rains, I think about you. He smiled. I do too. We climbed the same hill where we'd watched the sunset months earlier. Only this time, Harvey had packed an actual dinner, a blanket, candles tucked safely inside lanterns. Even my favorite dessert from the bakery near my apartment. You've been planning this for a while. A few weeks. You're getting good at surprises. I had a good teacher. I've never surprised you. You stopped for a stranger. That's the biggest surprise I've ever had. We ate while watching the sky slowly turn shades of orange and pink. The conversation wandered the way it always did. Work. Family. His nephew, who had recently learned to say, Uncle Harvey. My sister asking when she could officially stop referring to Harvey as the tire guy. I don't think that's ever going away, Harvey admitted. I've accepted my fate. You really should. As twilight settled over the valley, Harvey grew quieter. He kept turning something over inside his jacket pocket. You okay? He nodded. Just nervous. I smiled. That's usually my job. He laughed softly. I know. After a long moment, he stood. Come here. I followed him toward the overlook. The breeze was gentle. The first stars were beginning to appear overhead. Harvey turned to face me. I've replayed the night we met more times than I can count. I've thought about it too. I keep coming back to one thing. What's that? You stopped. He took a slow breath. You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. You could have driven right past. But you didn't. He looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. That one decision changed my life. I felt my throat tighten. It changed mine too. He smiled. I hoped you'd say that. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. This time, he pulled out a small box. I stared at it. Then at him. Then back at the box. Harvey. I know. He laughed nervously. This probably isn't the most traditional proposal. I don't think there's a rule that says it has to happen in a fancy restaurant. There isn't? I'm pretty sure. He opened the box. Inside were 2 simple silver rings. Nothing flashy, just elegant. Timeless. I don't believe in perfect timing anymore, he said quietly. I believed in it for years. I kept waiting. I waited to come out. I waited to tell people how I felt. I waited for life to somehow make the hard decisions easier. He shook his head. Then a tire blew out. I laughed through the emotion building in my chest. And a stubborn physical therapist decided to stop in the middle of a storm. I've never been so grateful for bad luck. His eyes never left mine. Mitchell. He took one more breath. Will you marry me? For a second, I couldn't speak. Every memory rushed back at once. The rain, the diner, our first coffee, meeting his family, our first kiss, the tiny silver tire keychains, every ordinary day that had quietly become extraordinary because we shared it. I smiled so hard it almost hurt. You know, I laughed. I was hoping you'd ask. Harvey blinked. Is that a yes? I stepped closer. It's absolutely yes. The relief on his face was immediate. He slipped the ring onto my finger with slightly trembling hands. I did the same for him. Then he wrapped his arms around me, holding me tightly as we both laughed. I love you, he whispered. I love you too. He kissed me beneath a sky full of stars, standing only a few yards from the place where we'd first met as strangers. A few minutes later, as we walked back toward the truck, I glanced once more at the stretch of road below. Cars passed without slowing, their headlights disappearing into the night. Someone else might someday stop there to help another stranger. Someone else might think it was just a small act of kindness. But I'd learned something over the past year. You never really know which ordinary decision is about to change your entire life. Sometimes it starts with nothing more than a storm and a stranger who needs help changing a tire.